Deep within the labyrinthine archives of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, beneath layers of dust and forgotten truths, lies a file so anomalous, so utterly bizarre, that its very existence is whispered only among the most senior agents. It's a declassified document, yet its contents remain shrouded in an almost impenetrable veil of secrecy, tantalizingly hinting at an interrogation like no other. The subject's identity is redacted, its species left blank, the very possibility of such an encounter seeming to defy all known laws of nature and reason. This particular file, marked with an archaic red stamp reading Project Chimera, points to the career-defining and ultimately career-ending moment for one specific agent. It speaks of hours spent in a windowless room, of questions asked and answers received from a source that should not, by any conventional understanding, have been capable of speech or even sentience. It hints at what humanity, in its relentless march, had done, not to itself, but to an entire, hidden species. Our story, however, truly begins not with the revelation of this file, but with the man at its very core, Agent Thomas Miller. Tom, as he was known to the handful of colleagues who breached his formidable professional facade, was a legend within the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Not for his physical prowess or his sharp shooting, but for his mind. He was a master of the human psyche, a virtuoso of interrogation, with a reputation built on an uncanny ability to peel back the layers of deceit, fear, and silence to unearth the truth. He possessed a rare, almost preternatural empathy, a quality often dismissed in the cutthroat world of federal law enforcement, but one that allowed him to connect with even the most hardened criminals. He had a way of getting suspects to talk, to confess, not through intimidation, but through a genuine, albeit calculated understanding of their hidden motivations. His success rate was unparalleled, his methods often unorthodox, and his results undeniable. He lived a solitary life, devoid of the usual domestic entanglements, his apartment a stark reflection of his mind, organized, minimalist, and utterly dedicated to his work. Every waking hour, every shred of his intellect, was poured into the pursuit of justice, often finding himself empathizing with the very individuals he was tasked with bringing down. A paradox he navigated with quiet stoicism. Now, on the cusp of his 50th birthday, Tom felt the creeping shadow of retirement. He was nearing the end of his illustrious career, his body perhaps not as sharp, his patience occasionally tested, yet his mind remained a steel trap. He knew this would be his last major case before he faded into obscurity. Another name in the annals of FBI history, perhaps remembered only for his enigmatic brilliance. The summons arrived on a Tuesday, an innocuous, unmarked envelope, delivered by a grim-faced courier who vanished as quickly as he appeared. Inside, a single, stark directive. Report to designated rendezvous point. Priority 1. Extreme discretion required. No case file, no particulars, just a set of coordinates leading to a remote, windswept airstrip in the middle of nowhere, miles from any recognizable landmark in the continental United States. Tom, accustomed to the secrecy that often accompanied high-profile cases, felt a prickle of unease. This felt different, heavier, laced with an unspoken urgency that transcended the usual classified operation. The brief, almost non-existent communication hinted at something unprecedented, a situation so far beyond the scope of his extensive experience that it chilled him to the bone. They weren't just calling on his skills. They were calling on his unique temperament, his capacity for understanding the incomprehensible. He packed a single small bag, leaving behind the meticulously organized life he had built, a life that was about to be irrevocably altered. He knew, instinctively, that whatever awaited him at that remote outpost would be unlike anything he had ever faced. The quiet hum of the private jet that whisked him away only amplified the unsettling silence of the unknown. He looked out at the fading landscape, the familiar world shrinking beneath him, a fleeting thought that perhaps he wouldn't return to it quite the same, if at all. The entire situation screamed of a classified operation of unimaginable scale, designed to be erased from existence the moment it concluded. Tom, the seasoned interrogator, felt a rare tremor of anticipation, mingled with a profound sense of apprehension. This was it, the final act, the ultimate test of his abilities. Before we delve deeper into Agent Miller's bewildering journey and the shocking secrets he was about to uncover, remember to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss a single moment of this mind-bending true story, a narrative that challenges the very foundations of what we believe to be real. The fortified gate groaned open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a tunnel bathed in a sterile, almost blinding white light. Agent Thomas Miller, his travel-worn suit feeling suddenly inadequate, stepped from the armored transport onto polished concrete that reflected his weary face like a distorted mirror. The air, recycled and cold, hummed with the unseen machinery of a high-security black site, a place designed to exist outside the world, outside the law, outside even common knowledge. Every corridor, every door, every glance from the limited personnel he encountered spoke of extreme secrecy, of a truth so volatile it had to be buried deep beneath layers of steel and silence. He was led by two grim-faced, heavily armed guards, their steps echoing in the unnerving quiet. The facility was an architectural contradiction, state-of-the-art technology encased in a brutalist, windowless shell, a monument to fear and containment. As they moved deeper, the temperature seemed to drop, and the air grew thick with a metallic tang that pricked at his nostrils. Tom, a man accustomed to the psychological chess of the interrogation room, found his usual composure tested by the sheer oppressive atmosphere of the place. This wasn't a prison. It was a vault for the unthinkable. Finally, they halted before a massive blast-proof door, its surface scarred with what looked like ancient etched symbols, a strange detail in such a modern, sterile environment. One guard activated a retinal scanner, then a series of keypads, before the door slowly, silently, retracted into the wall. Tom braced himself, unsure what to expect, but knowing it would challenge his every preconception. Inside, the room was stark, built for function over comfort. Reinforced concrete walls, a single steel table bolted to the floor, and a pair of chairs, one of which was much larger, heavier, secured with industrial-grade restraints. The lighting was dim, deliberately so, casting long, unsettling shadows. And then he saw it. Huddled in the larger chained chair was the subject. It was enormous, easily twice the bulk of a large man, covered in thick, dark brown fur that seemed to absorb the meager light. Its head was low, almost resting on its massive chest, but Tom could discern the broad, powerful shoulders, the immense hands ending in thick, blunted claws that, even restrained, hinted at incredible strength. The air in the room was heavy with its presence, a primal scent of damp earth and something wild, untamed. This was not a bear, not an ape from any zoo he'd ever visited, nor any known primate. This was unmistakably a Sasquatch, a creature of myth and campfire tales, now reduced to a captive, chained within the sterile confines of an FBI black site. Tom felt a visceral jolt, a cold dread entwined with an almost scientific fascination. His mind, trained for analytical thought, struggled to reconcile the impossible reality before him with the world he knew. He'd interviewed murderers, terrorists, spies, monsters of the human variety. But this defied logic, mocked reason. Yet there it was, undeniably real, breathing heavily, a low, rumbling sound emanating from its chest. The sheer audacity of its existence, confined in such a manner, was a profound shock. He walked slowly towards the table, maintaining a professional distance, but his every nerve ending screamed at the impossibility. He saw the gleam of intelligent eyes, dark and deep-set, watching him from beneath a heavy brow, filled with an ancient weariness, a profound fear. The creature was agitated, its massive frame occasionally tensing against the chains, producing a soft, metallic clink that only served to emphasize its entrapment. Ignoring the guard's silent, watchful presence, Tom took the smaller chair, placing it opposite the creature. He spoke softly, his voice low and even, the practiced cadence of an interrogator seeking to disarm. "Hello," he began, the word feeling utterly inadequate. "My name is Thomas Miller. I'm here to talk." The creature didn't respond, only shifted slightly, its head lifting barely an inch, its gaze fixed on him. Its breathing picked up, shallow and quick. Tom recognized the signs of extreme stress, of terror. This was not a mindless beast. It was a sentient being, caught in a nightmare. "I'm not here to hurt you," Tom continued, his voice unwavering. He cleared his throat, pushing aside his own disbelief. "I understand this must be very frightening. I can offer you some water, if you'd like." He gestured towards a sealed bottle on the table. A low growl rumbled up from the creature's chest, a sound like distant thunder, not overtly threatening, but laden with deep distress. Its eyes, for a moment, flickered with something akin to defiance, then retreated into a dull resignation. It was clearly terrified, exhausted, and utterly unwilling to engage. Tom tried another approach. Do you understand me?" he asked, slowing his words, modulating his tone. He watched for any micro-expression, any nonverbal cue, anything that might betray comprehension. He was met only with silence, the heavy breathing, and the occasional frustrated tug against the chains. Its silence was a wall, thick and unyielding, built of fear and perhaps something far older, a deep-seated caution born of generations. He knew he couldn't force it. He had to earn its trust, something he'd done countless times with human subjects. But this was different. This was uncharted territory, a psychological landscape he didn't even know existed. He spent the next hour simply observing, speaking occasionally in gentle tones, describing the water, describing his own non-threatening intentions. He noted its rapid eye movements, the way its nostrils flared, subtly analyzing the unfamiliar sensory data. He documented every detail in his mind, cataloging the impossible reality with the meticulous precision of an FBI agent. Even though every fiber of his being screamed that this was a dream, a hallucination, the creature remained unresponsive, a massive, furry statue of fear and despair. The obstacle wasn't its intelligence, Tom slowly realized. It was its profound, traumatized silence. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that challenged everything he thought he knew about the world, and indeed, about himself. This was going to be the most challenging interrogation of his career. Perhaps even a futile one, but he couldn't back down. The fate of something far greater than any criminal case seemed to hang in the balance. The sterile white days bled into equally sterile, featureless nights within the insulated confines of the black site. Tom, a man accustomed to the predictable rhythms of interrogation rooms, found himself adrift in a sea of unprecedented challenge. Hours stretched into an eternity as he tirelessly pressed on, his voice a constant, gentle hum against the creature's steadfast silence. The initial shock had long since given way to a stubborn determination, fueled by a nascent, unshakable belief that there was more to this specimen than his superiors could ever comprehend. His colleagues, the steely-eyed men and women who monitored every breath and blink through the one-way glass, offered increasingly thinly veiled skepticism, their impatience a palpable force pressing in on him. Yet, Tom refused to yield. He felt a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the creature's demeanor, a minute softening around the eyes, a flicker of something beyond mere fear or animalistic defiance. It was a glint of intelligence, an ancient wisdom that occasionally broke through the mask of its primal terror. He no longer saw just a large, hairy biped. He saw a sentient being, albeit one profoundly traumatized. Tom continued his monologue, not of interrogation tactics, but of simple humanity. He spoke of the wind through autumn leaves, of the quiet solitude of forests he loved, of the deep ache of loneliness that sometimes gripped even the strongest of souls. He found himself sharing vulnerabilities he wouldn't dare reveal to another human agent, sensing that this creature, in its profound otherness, might be the only one capable of truly understanding a certain kind of profound isolation. He recounted the quiet grief he carried from losing his own wife years ago, a loss that had carved a permanent hollow in his chest, a loneliness he had learned to live with, but never truly overcome. He spoke not to elicit information, but to connect, to bridge the seemingly impassable chasm between them. One endless afternoon, as Tom described the bittersweet memory of his wife's gentle touch, a low, guttural sound rumbled from the creature's chest. It wasn't a growl of aggression, nor a whimper of fear, but something akin to a sigh, heavy with resignation, and an echo of shared sorrow. Tom paused, his breath catching. He met its gaze, and for the first time, detected not just intellect, but profound empathy. A tear, thick and slow, traced a path down the creature's weathered cheek, a stark, undeniable testament to a shared emotional landscape. It was then, in that fragile moment of connection, that the creature moved its immense hand, a gesture both hesitant and desperate, pointing towards its chest, then making a slow, dragging motion down its side. It was a universal sign of profound hurt, of a deep wound. Tom, his heart pounding, reciprocated the gesture, placing a hand over his own chest. "Pain?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The creature nodded, a deliberate, slow movement, its eyes fixed on his. Then, with immense effort, its throat working, it produced a strained, raspy sound, a series of guttural vibrations that slowly, agonizingly, coalesced into something vaguely recognizable. "Hurt," it rasped, the word a raw, tearing sound, clearly unfamiliar to its vocal cords. It was a single, broken syllable, an echo of human language imperfectly formed, yet undeniably potent. The air in the room crackled with a new, terrifying energy. The monitors beyond the glass undoubtedly registered the spike in Tom's heart rate, the sudden shift in the subject's vocal patterns. But Tom barely noticed. He was transfixed, witnessing a miracle. He repeated the word, clearly, slowly, "Hurt?" And for the first time, it looked directly at him, a flicker of something akin to hope in its deep-set eyes. It pointed again to its chest, then to the floor, mimicking the motion of something being struck, then dragged. The creature's movements, though still clumsy in their translation, spoke volumes. It made sweeping gestures, indicating vast woodlands, then brought its hands together sharply, as if crushing something. It pointed to its ear, then quickly covered it, flinching, as if from a loud, jarring noise. It was communicating immense pain, not just a physical ache, but an ancient, profound sorrow that transcended the immediate confines of its captivity. There was a story etched into its very being, a narrative of past traumas, of a history of being hunted, wronged, and relentlessly pursued. Tom suddenly understood that the chains on its wrists were merely a recent addition to a far longer, invisible tether of suffering it had endured, a sorrow woven into the very fabric of its existence. The raw emotion emanating from it was overwhelming. A silent cry for understanding, a testament to an existence riddled with fear and loss, painting a vivid, though wordless, picture of what humanity had inflicted upon its kind. The creature, whom Tom had silently begun to call Kale, a name that resonated with strength and ancient wisdom in his mind, finally began to articulate fragments of its story, imperfectly formed human words, slowly giving way to more coherent, albeit still strained, sentences. The initial, hurt, expanded into a guttural symphony of sounds, carefully observed by Tom, who meticulously transcribed its attempts, charting its progress from primal cries to rudimentary descriptions. Kyle spoke of a forgotten existence, a life woven into the very fabric of the earth, dwelling in deep harmony with the forests, hidden from the ever-encroaching gaze of humanity. Its voice, though raspy and unused to the complex intonations of human speech, carried an undeniable weight, a resonance of ancient truths whispered across millennia. It described its species, a community it referred to as the Silent Watchers, a peaceful, intelligent race dedicated to the meticulous stewardship of the wildlands. Kale's large, expressive eyes, now less clouded by fear and more by a deep-seated melancholy, conveyed visions of lush, untouched forests, rivers running pure and clear, mountains standing sentinel over their solitary existence. It emphasized their profound, almost spiritual connection to the earth, a bond so intrinsic that they felt the pulse of the planet in their very bones. Their sensitivity to the natural world was absolute, a hyper-awareness of every rustle of leaves, every shift in wind, every subtle change in the ecosystem. This deep connection, Kale explained, was the source of their ancient wisdom, a wisdom passed down through generations, not through books or scrolls, but through shared experiences, through intuition, through the very essence of the wilderness they protected. They were the unsung guardians, living echoes of a time when the world was younger and its secrets more profound. Then, the narrative shifted, the gentle cadence of its descriptions giving way to a tone laced with sorrow and a palpable sense of loss. Kyle's massive hand, with surprising delicacy, traced shapes in the air, depicting the relentless march of humanity. It spoke of a slow, insidious encroachment, a gradual tightening of the noose around their pristine world. Deforestation was a stark theme, conveyed through gestures of immense trees falling, the ground shuddering, the air filling with the acrid scent of destruction. Pollution followed, visualized as murky waters, skies stained with unnatural smoke, and the constant jarring cacophony of machines that ripped through the once sacred silence of their abodes. The relentless spread of human civilization, depicted as ever-growing concrete structures devouring green expanses, was a visual echo of their shrinking world, a world where their sanctuary was systematically dismantled brick by brick. Kyle's voice, though still struggling, grew stronger with its indignation, its sorrow. It described watching its world shrink, fragment by fragment, like a cherished tapestry slowly unraveling. It recounted the terror of its family being hunted, not for food or survival, but out of fear, sport, or a primal, unyielding desire to conquer the unknown. Its sacred grounds, places of ancestral memory and quiet communion with nature, were desecrated, turned into construction sites, or scarred by human refuse. This was the core revelation of what humanity had done, not just to Kyle, but to an entire species, a hidden civilization that had once thrived in harmony with the very elements humanity was so recklessly destroying. The weight of this confession hung heavy in the air, a testament to ecological devastation and a profound breach of trust. Tom listened, utterly captivated, as hours melted away into an intense, emotionally charged torrent of communication. Kyle's words, now flowing with a greater, albeit still limited fluency, painted a vivid picture of a world lost, of a paradise systematically plundered. It wasn't merely a recounting of facts. It was a lament, a dirge for a vanishing way of life. The creature's eyes, filled with unshed tears, articulated volumes beyond spoken language, reflecting centuries of silent watchfulness, turning into centuries of silent suffering. It described the bewildering incomprehension of its kind when confronted with humanity's insatiable drive for expansion, its seemingly endless appetite for resources, its disregard for the delicate balance of the natural world. Kyle conveyed the chilling realization that their attempts to remain hidden, to coexist peacefully, were futile against a force that saw only conquest, only exploitation. The very air seemed to thicken with the echoes of ancient forests being felled, the cries of hidden creatures driven from their homes, the sacred silence shattered by the relentless march of progress. This was not just a story of a single individual. It was an elegy for an entire world, a devastating indictment of humanity's impact on its planet and its hidden cohabitants. The silent watchers had watched indeed, but their silence had become their undoing, their peaceful existence a tragic vulnerability in the face of an aggressively expanding, unseeing human world. The raw emotion emanating from Kale was overwhelming, a silent cry for understanding, a testament to an existence riddled with fear and loss, painting a vivid, though wordless, picture of what humanity had inflicted upon its kind. Tom, his throat tight, knelt closer, his professional detachment having long since evaporated in the face of such profound ancient pain. Kyle slowly, deliberately, brought its massive hand to its chest, then extended it, miming cradling something precious. A soft, mournful sound, like wind through barren trees, escaped its lips. It then moved its hands in a protective, swaying motion, a universally recognizable gesture of a parent comforting a child. Tom's heart clenched. He understood. This was not just about the species, about Kale's kind, but about an individual, a family. Kale's eyes, deep and knowing, locked with Tom's, and it began to communicate in earnest, a complex tapestry of gestures, infrequent strained words, and an almost telepathic transference of feeling that transcended the barriers of language. It recounted, with agonizing clarity, the memory of its own mate, a creature of serene strength and gentle eyes, and their young. It showed Tom images, mental projections, it felt like, of playful romps through sun-dappled forests, of teaching the little one to forage for berries, to recognize the scent of rain before it fell. Then the images shifted, darkened. The scent of wood smoke, acrid and alien, filled Tom's senses, even though it was only a memory being shared. The fear, sharp and primal, was palpable. Kale's movements grew agitated, its breath coming in ragged gasps. It mimed running, crashing through undergrowth, the frantic pace of a desperate flight. The sound it made was like a low, sustained wail of anguish that resonated deep within Tom's own chest. It showed the glimpse of a muzzle flash, the terrifying crack of an unfamiliar sound ripping through the peaceful forest, the sudden sickening collapse of its mate, a silent heap amongst the ferns. Tom's vision blurred, the vividness of Cale's shared memory so acute it felt as though he too was witnessing the horror unfold. The creature's hands moved to its chest, clutching an imaginary form, then slowly, agonizingly, laid it down. Its head dropped, and a guttural sob, unlike anything Tom had ever heard, tore from its massive frame. It was the sound of a universe breaking. The pursuit, Cale indicated, had been relentless, driven by a primal urge for territory, for dominance, by humans who saw them not as intelligent beings, but as monsters, as legends to be hunted, as trophies to be claimed. It showed Tom the fear in the eyes of its offspring, clutching tightly to its fur, sensing the impending doom though it couldn't comprehend. The sheer terror, the constant threat that had stalked its kind for generations, was etched into Cale's very being, a trauma that ran deeper than any physical wound. It wasn't just the memory of one hunt, but the cumulative despair of watching its world shrink, its family become targets, its very existence an anomaly to be eradicated or exploited. The loss of its mate, the terror of its child, the relentless pursuit. These were not singular events, but the defining tragedies of a life lived on the razor's edge of extinction. Tom felt a cold dread spread through him, a sickness that settled deep in his gut. His professional objectivity, painstakingly built over decades of interrogating humanity's darkest elements, had utterly dissolved. He was no longer an FBI agent analyzing a subject. He was a human being bearing witness to an unspeakable tragedy caused by his own species. A profound sense of guilt, of collective responsibility, washed over him. He felt the weight of every broken forest, every polluted river, every creature driven from its home, every myth twisted into a monstrous caricature. The professional detachment he had cultivated as a shield, allowing him to navigate the grimy underbelly of society without succumbing to despair, had crumbled completely, leaving him raw and exposed. Genuine heartbreak and empathy, emotions he rarely allowed himself to fully acknowledge, welled up, threatening to overwhelm him. His gaze drifted to the reinforced steel and thick glass of the interrogation room, then to the silent, watchful cameras. The government wanted answers, data, proof of an impossible creature. But what they had captured was not a specimen, but a sentient being with a soul, a history, and a capacity for profound suffering. Tom now understood the gravity of Cale's existence and the immense implications of its story, implications that stretched far beyond any intelligence briefing or national security concern. The desire of the shadowy figures outside to keep this secret, to contain this impossible truth, crystallized into a chilling clarity. They weren't protecting humanity. They were protecting humanity from itself, from the truth of its own destructive impact, from the moral reckoning that Cale's story demanded. He grappled with his duty as an FBI agent, sworn to uphold the laws and secrets of his government, versus the burgeoning demands of his conscience. The man who had entered this room, the methodical, pragmatic Agent Miller, was gone. In his place was a man irrevocably altered, burdened by a truth too enormous to carry alone, too vital to remain hidden. The world needed to hear Cale's story, but the forces aligned against that revelation were immense, powerful, and utterly ruthless. How could he reconcile his professional obligations with the moral imperative he now felt so deeply? The answer, he knew, would redefine the remainder of his life, whatever little was left of it. The profound sorrow emanating from the creature, Cale, as Tom now thought of it, was a physical presence in the sterile interrogation room, a weight that pressed down on Tom's spirit. Cale, through strained vocalizations and powerful, descriptive gestures, had painted a picture of relentless suffering. Now it shifted its immense weight, its eyes locking with Tom's, and a new clarity entered its communication. No longer just a recounting of past hurts, but a direct, desperate plea. It extended a massive, calloused hand, palm open, then slowly closed it into a fist, tapping its chest. It was a gesture of profound meaning, a plea not for personal freedom, but for a different kind of liberation. "Tell," Cale rasped, the word clearer this time, less fractured, though still thick with effort. "Tell them no." Tom's mind raced, piecing together the broken fragments of language and the overwhelming emotional resonance. Cale wasn't asking to be released from its chains, not directly. It was asking for its story to be told, for humanity to know the truth of its kind, the truth of their existence, and the irreversible damage being wreaked upon the planet. An ecological devastation that inextricably linked their fate with humanity's. The creature wasn't seeking revenge. It sought understanding, a desperately needed peace, not just for itself, but for its entire species. Its gaze was piercing, filled with an ancient wisdom and a desperate hope, urging Tom to be its voice, to bridge the seemingly impassable chasm between their worlds, to warn humanity of the consequences of its relentless expansion. Outside the interrogation chamber, the hushed tension of the black site was escalating. Tom could feel the shift, the increasing impatience from command. Colonel Hayes, a man whose face was perpetually etched with the grim lines of institutional authority, peered through the reinforced observation glass with an almost predatory intensity. He saw Cale not as a sentient being experiencing profound emotional and physical pain, but as an asset, a specimen, a strategic intelligence target. His concern wasn't for Cale's well-being or its plea for harmonious coexistence. It was for what Cale could offer, in terms of data, technological advantage, or even military applications. A resource to be exploited, not a life to be understood. "Miller, what are we getting?" Hayes's voice crackled through Tom's earpiece, devoid of any warmth or empathy. "We've had you in there for days. Is it giving up any locations, any numbers? Are there more of them? Where are they hiding? We don't have time for a therapy session. We need actionable intelligence." Tom gripped the cold metal of the table, his knuckles white. The contrast between Cale's earnest, heart-wrenching request and Hayes's cold utilitarian demands was jarring, a stark reminder of the conflicting worlds he now inhabited. He was torn, caught precariously between his duty to the FBI, an organization built on order and secrecy, and his burgeoning, deeply personal connection with Cale, a connection that transcended species and logic. Kyle's story was a universe-altering revelation, a potential paradigm shift for humanity, a primal scream from the natural world. But the risk of revealing it, the sheer magnitude of the societal upheaval, the potential for exploitation was immense. He saw the Black Site commanders as a microcosm of humanity's worst impulses: fear, greed, and a crushing need for control. "Colonel," Tom replied, his voice carefully neutral, "it's articulating its species' history, their interactions with humans, the environmental impact on their habitat. It's profound." He chose his words meticulously, trying to convey the depth of the information without revealing the emotional core that would undoubtedly be dismissed as irrelevant by the brass. Hayes, however, was clearly not interested in profundity. Profound? Hayes scoffed, the sound grating. We need coordinates, Miller. We need to know who else is out there and how to contain them. Is it hostile? Does it pose a threat? We're talking national security here, not a nature documentary. Tom's heart sank. They simply didn't get it. Or perhaps, more accurately, they didn't want to get it. They saw a threat where Tom saw a victim, a resource where he saw a soul. Cale's plea for understanding, for peace, was being systematically dismantled by the rigid, fear-driven agenda of the command. The pressure intensified with each passing hour. Other agents, younger, less experienced, and hardened by years of following orders without question, entered the observation room, their faces betraying impatience and a growing skepticism regarding Tom's soft approach. Whispers of bringing in more aggressive interrogators, of using less conventional methods, began to circulate, reaching Tom even within the soundproofed chamber. It was a thinly veiled threat, a warning that his time was running out. He looked at Cale again, truly seeing the ancient pain in its eyes, the desperate glimmer of hope in its plea. He saw the silent tears that still occasionally tracked down its fur-covered face, a testament to its profound emotional capacity. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that if he simply extracted the data Hayes wanted, if he bowed to the pressure, Kyle's story would be buried, its existence classified, its species hunted to extinction in the name of national security. The world would never know. Humanity would continue its destructive path, oblivious to the intelligent, peaceful beings it was systematically eradicating, beings that held a crucial key to understanding the planet's delicate balance. Tom felt a tremor deep within him, a moral earthquake. His entire career at the FBI had been defined by a strict adherence to duty, to law, to the precise execution of orders. But Cale had shattered those foundations, exposing a deeper, more urgent truth. He was at a profound moral crossroads. Could he sacrifice his conscience for his career? Could he allow Cale's plea to fall on deaf ears, to be twisted and misused by those who saw only power and control? The thought felt like a betrayal, a profound personal failure that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The potential for Cale's story to change the world was immense, but so was the immense danger of revealing it. The weight of this decision, heavy and suffocating, pressed down on him, threatening to crush his resolve. He had to choose, and the choice would define not only his future, but perhaps the future of both species. "Miller, we're done with the parlor games." Hayes's voice sliced through the comms, devoid of any pretense of patience. The steel in his tone sent a chill down Tom's spine, a clear indicator that the situation was escalating rapidly. "We need actionable intelligence, not philosophical musings. If you can't get it to talk about its society, its capabilities, its vulnerabilities, then we will bring in someone who can. And believe me, Miller, their methods won't be as empathetic as yours." "With all due respect, sir." Tom's voice was strained, his eyes still fixed on Cale, whose posture had subtly tensed at the new, harsher tone resonating from the command center, even if it couldn't understand the words. "You're missing the point entirely. This isn't about tactical advantage. It's about understanding a sentient life form. You risk alienating it completely, closing off any chance of genuine communication." He knew he was pushing back against an immovable force, but he couldn't back down now. Not after everything. Hayes laughed, a humorless, chilling sound. "Alienating it? Miller, this isn't a negotiation. It's an interrogation. You have 1 hour to deliver concrete, quantifiable data. After that, we're going to proceed with a more direct approach. Understand? The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Tom didn't need to ask what direct approach meant. He'd seen enough enhanced interrogations in his career to know the devastating toll they took, regardless of the subject. He looked at Cale, whose eyes, full of ancient wisdom and recent pain, met his. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Cale seemed to sense the shift, the imminent danger. A cold resolve settled over Tom. He would not allow it. He couldn't. Everything he had learned from Cale, every shred of shared trust they had painstakingly built, screamed against it. This wasn't just a classified subject anymore. It was a being that had shared its soul, its profound sorrow, its desperate hope. To abandon it now would be to betray not just Cale, but his own humanity. He glanced at the small, inconspicuous digital recorder he carried, always on his person, a habit ingrained from years of documenting every interaction. It was still running, silently capturing every word, every nuance of their conversation. A dangerous thought sparked, then quickly solidified into an unwavering decision. He couldn't let Cale be silenced or exploited. The world needed to hear this, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had ever worked for. "Cale," Tom said, his voice low, urgent, yet filled with a newfound steel. He abandoned the careful interrogative tone. "They're going to try to hurt you. They don't understand." He struggled to find the right words, the human concepts inadequate to convey the impending brutality. He used gestures, pointing to himself, then to Cale, then making a motion of protection. Cale's dark eyes widened slightly, a flicker of comprehension. The creature slowly extended a large, powerful hand, its fur surprisingly soft to the touch, and placed it gently on Tom's arm. It was a gesture of trust, of quiet acknowledgement. Then, with an almost imperceptible effort, Cale began to speak again, its voice a gravelly whisper, each word a monumental struggle, yet imbued with a profound, almost spiritual resonance. It wasn't answering Hayes's questions. It was delivering a final, desperate message, spoken not for the impatient ears beyond the glass, but for Tom, and through him, perhaps, for the world. "All interconnected," Cale breathed, its gaze fixed not on Tom, but seemingly through him, to some distant horizon only it could perceive. "Life, a weave, break thread, whole cloth, unravels." Each word was punctuated by a deep shuddering breath, as if the very act of vocalizing such truths caused it immense physical pain. "Humanity forgets, takes, never gives, sees only separate pieces, not whole." Tom felt a tremor of awe, a deep, unsettling reverence at the creature's words. This wasn't just a plea. It was an ancient warning, a lament born of countless generations, witnessing the slow, inexorable destruction of their world. Cale was speaking of the delicate balance of nature, a concept humanity had long intellectualized but rarely internalized. "The trees, they whisper. The rivers, they sing. The earth, it breathes," Cale continued, its voice gaining a faint, ethereal quality, a wisdom so ancient it seemed to transcend the confines of the sterile room. "You, deaf to the song, blind to the breath, your path, fire, consumes all." Fear mixed with profound sadness in Tom's chest. This was not the raving of a trapped animal. This was the eloquent, heartbreaking farewell of a dying world, delivered by its last, desperate messenger. Kyle spoke of humanity's relentless pursuit of progress, of its insatiable hunger, its inability to see beyond its immediate desires. It described the forests shrinking, the waters poisoning, the silent exodus of countless species, each loss a tear in the fabric of existence. "We watched," Cale whispered, its voice thick with sorrow. "Watched our homes vanish. Watched our kin fall. Watched the balance shatter. Humanity thinks it stands alone, separate. It is part of the weave. When weave breaks, all falls." Tom knew, with absolute certainty, that this was Cale's final, most poignant message. It was a warning delivered not with malice, but with a deep, ancestral grief, a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. It was a prophecy of humanity's own undoing, a direct consequence of its destructive path. The full weight of his decision, the immense risk, settled upon him. He was about to betray his government, his career, his entire life's work. But in this moment, looking into Cale's sorrowful, wise eyes, he knew there was no other choice. He would ensure this message, this profound and terrible truth, would not die here in this cold, dark room. His life, he realized, was about to change forever. The intervention from command was imminent, and he had to act. He would face the consequences, whatever they may be, for the sake of Cale's story, for the sake of the truth. The choice, though agonizing, ultimately became clear. Tom could not be complicit in Cale's silencing. His career, his reputation, even his freedom, suddenly seemed utterly insignificant against the backdrop of the profound injustice unfolding before him. He had spent his life pursuing truth, and now the greatest truth he had ever encountered was on the verge of being obliterated. The black site's secure network had a backdoor he knew about, a relic from an older system, one he had occasionally exploited for benign, bureaucratic shortcuts in the past. It was risky, almost suicidal, but it was his only option. That night, under the guise of an extended interrogation session, mandated by his superiors, Tom took action. He activated an encrypted, one-time data burst, carefully uploading a heavily redacted but emotionally resonant summary of Cale's narrative. He included key excerpts from Cale's vocalizations, carefully edited to convey sentience and suffering without revealing the full extent of its linguistic capabilities, and a few blurred images of its peaceful demeanor inside the chamber. The target was a small, independent online news collective, known for its investigative journalism and its unwavering commitment to uncovering stories the mainstream media often ignored or suppressed. They were anonymous, decentralized, and notoriously difficult to trace. He knew the FBI would eventually connect the dots back to him, but by then, the digital breadcrumbs would have scattered, the story already taking root in the public consciousness. The immediate repercussions were swift and brutal. Within hours, the site went into lockdown. Tom was relieved of duty, his access revoked, and placed under immediate house arrest in a remote facility, accused of gross insubordination, dereliction of duty, and potential espionage. The formal charges would follow, he knew. But what they couldn't touch was the quiet sense of satisfaction that settled within him, a peace he hadn't felt in years. His conscience was clear. He had done what was right, not what was easy or expected. His career, a meticulously built edifice of loyalty and service, crumbled around him. The whispers of his fall from grace turned into outright condemnation from his former colleagues, but he found he didn't care. The years that followed were a blur of legal battles, public scrutiny, and ultimately, a quiet disappearance from the public eye. He was dismissed from the FBI, stripped of his pension, and faced the indignity of being labeled a disillusioned conspiracy theorist, an agent who had finally snapped under the pressure. The official narrative was that he had suffered a mental breakdown, fabricating an elaborate fantasy about a talking ape. The government vehemently denied any knowledge of a Bigfoot interrogation, dismissing the leaked documents as sophisticated hoaxes or the ramblings of a disturbed individual. Yet something had shifted, irrevocably. The story, fragmented and distorted as it was, had resonated. It tapped into a deep, archetypal longing within humanity, a suppressed desire to believe in the mysterious, to acknowledge what lies just beyond the veil of their understanding. The internet, that chaotic crucible of information and misinformation, snatched up the crumbs Tom had thrown. Overnight, the legend of Bigfoot ceased to be merely a cryptid tale. It became a poignant parable. Suddenly, every sighting, every blurred photograph, every indistinct howl heard in the wilderness took on a new, more somber meaning. Years passed. Agent Thomas Miller, now simply Tom, lived a quiet, isolated life, nestled deep within a small cabin in the Pacific Northwest, far from the concrete jungles and the intricate webs of federal bureaucracy. The wilderness he had once seen as merely a backdrop to his investigations now became his sanctuary, his teacher. He spent his days hiking, observing, and listening. He channeled his profound experience with Kyle into a new purpose, volunteering with small, underfunded conservation groups, advocating for the preservation of wildlands. He spoke rarely of his past, but when he did, his words carried the weight of a man who had seen beyond the visible world and understood the true, fragile value of life beyond human perception. He never explicitly mentioned Kale, never confirmed the government's denials, but his impassioned pleas for ecological stewardship, for a deeper respect for all species, for listening to the silent voices of the forest, carried an undeniable resonance. The seeds he had planted had taken root in unexpected ways. The public awareness of environmental issues, while still battling powerful interests, seemed to gain a new kind of momentum. There was a subtle but perceptible shift in collective consciousness. Documentaries about unexplained sightings often included a segment acknowledging the Miller leaks and the underlying message of humanity's impact. Young activists spoke of the forgotten ones, echoing Kale's sorrowful narrative. It wasn't a sudden, revolutionary change, but a slow, almost imperceptible softening, a growing respect for the unseen, a hesitant acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity wasn't alone, and that its actions had far-reaching, devastating consequences for beings of whom it remained blissfully or willfully ignorant. The story of the Sasquatch, once relegated to sensational headlines and campfires, began to weave itself into the fabric of environmental discourse, a haunting, whispered legend, reminding humanity of its spiritual debt to the planet. Tom, watching the world from his secluded vantage point, felt a quiet vindication. He had lost everything, but in doing so, he had given Kale a voice and perhaps a whisper of hope for its kind. What do you think happened to Kale after Tom's actions? Did the leak provide enough cover, or was it merely a temporary reprieve? Share your theories in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, give us a like, share it with a friend, and click on the video playing now for another incredible deep dive into the unknown.